Are we not raising our voices out there to speak up? We as leaders, are we not advocating enough for our profession as well? I mean, media evidence comes out there. If you look at Corruption Watch, you look at facts that's coming from Transparency International as well, you look at the Zondo Commission as well, there is a corrupter and a corruptee within the challenges that we are faced with in our country. So the question is, what steps are we taking forward as leaders of supply chain? And what are the biggest solutions? Are we going to really recommend out there to either the private sector and the public sector as we leave our conversation today? So colleagues, today the discussion is really around ethical leadership, contextualizing all those areas that I have identified. And we really need to come up with solutions, not a talk shop today, and really say, how do we support the professionals? How do we support academia? How do we support our country to grow economically? How do we now start creating employment in our country in the midst of where we are? But also, how do we ensure that our profession will really always be recognized as economically driving and making a difference out there? So colleagues, that is the seed that I just planted already in terms of the state of affairs. The detail will come with my panelists. Like I said, I have an easy job today. All I will be doing is listening, asking the questions to my panelists, and they will be able to share more insight in that environment. So as you have seen from the agenda that we have, the person that will be starting and opening up the conversation, and I'm going to tell you how the session will run this morning. Each and every panelist will have 5 to 10 minutes, I think, for contextualizing the topic that they have. Some of them will take 5 minutes, I guess, but the main important thing is that there will be multiple questions that are raised against them. And those multiple questions will really around ensuring that, we drive in some few questions. Earlier, I have indicated that we ran a survey 3 weeks ago. And colleagues, I will share with you the results of the survey that we ran around the role of supply chain professionals in our country. So it will speak to some of the areas of discussions that we are having with our panelists this morning. All right, so our first panelist for this morning is Mr. Vule Nemukula. I know most of you know him as the leader in supply chain, and Vule, where is he right now? He's one of the trendsetters, I think, that we know in supply chain. So he's currently the Chief Procurement Officer in Transnet, and previously he was the Chief Executive Officer at Oreport Bulk Commodities Trading Company. He has more than 25 years in supply chain. I mean, I remember Vule a couple of years ago when he was with previous organization and we worked with him. I always saw the passion that came out of him in terms of supply chain. And the most important thing, I always want you to notice that I said he was a chief executive officer. Who said that supply chain people can never be CEOs? Always remember what leadership, what our role really is. We can be CEOs in companies. And yes, Vule right now has taken up a new role as a chief procurement officer for Transnet Group. Vule, it is your chance now to shine.
Thank you very much, Lebo, and good morning, everyone. Colleagues, today's topic is really a very exciting topic, Lebo. I think for me, I look at this topic as an emotive topic in South Africa, in the sense that I think out of all participants and panelists that are in here this morning, they are touched in terms of the topic that we need to talk about. It's a topic that is emotive because it's affecting each and every one of us in supply chain, but there's not really anyone that would want to talk about it. I think today, what I will do in terms of setting the tone in terms of this topic, I just need to really talk briefly about what ethical supply chain or ethical procurement is. Specifically from where I'm sitting at the moment, it starts with the leadership. Any ethical procurement that you would see, it starts with ethical leadership. And one would need to define what ethical leadership is. And from where I'm sitting at the moment, really the simple definition of ethical leadership is when you are doing the right things, even when there is no one watching. And it's very, very critical in the sense that, you need to make sure that all the time, even when there's no one that will get to know what you've done, you need to do the right things. And some of us have been caught in certain instances where, you are driving alone late at night and the traffic lights are red. And then because there's no one, you can cross them and then you carry on with your business. And over and above that, from time to time, we get stopped by traffic officers that would ask for cool drink, whilst no one is watching. Some of us would definitely possibly give a cool drink to evade that traffic fine. So this is really the things that I think we need to look at when we build the issue of ethical leadership and ethical procurement. And on the side of procurement, it's very exciting in the sense that Lebo has already indicated that we've got quite a lot of challenges in South Africa today. And most of these challenges are caused by the fact that we've got certain people that possibly do not even know that some of the things that they are doing are not ethical. And some of the people that know exactly what they need to do, and they are literally not doing what they're supposed to do. In terms of ethical procurement, one of the things that we just need to think about is to say, where we are sitting at the moment, what is ethical procurement? And I know that within the public sector, we are governed. There are certain legislative framework and prescripts of the law that we need to comply with. But in the private sector, is less, of an issue in terms of what is ethical procurement. Really, from where I'm sitting at the moment, colleagues, I look at ethical procurement as that act where you are conducting your procurement process in a fair and transparent way, even when it's not legally required that you need to do that. And this is really the issue that it necessitates that all people that are working in this kind of environment, they need to understand specifically what are the things that they need to comply with. Lebo did indicate about the challenges that we have at the moment. If you turn on your TV, you basically get the Zondo Commission. Really, I look at the Zondo Commission as really one of those unfortunate situations where procurement function is under scrutiny without its custodians. And I'm saying that without its custodians because a lot of issues that are coming out of the corruption that is coming out of the Zondo Commission is not mainly perpetuated by procurement professionals, but procurement professionals were facilitators. Whether they knew or not, is still called corruption. And one of the other things that are very, very critical in terms of the ethics of procurement, colleagues, is the fact that when you are in procurement, you are either ethical or you are not. And the issues of ethics cannot be learned. You are either have integrity or you don't have integrity. In business, I would prefer to work with people that are poor performers because you can send them to training and then they get to a level where they can improve on their performance. However, when somebody is unethical, it's something that you cannot go and learn. And again, the other issues, again, that I think all of us, we need to really take into consideration is the fact that where there is no ethics, corruption thrives. And you would be able to look at what is happening every day within the private and public sector. And you would know that, look, whatever we are doing at the moment is causing us a lot of challenges in South Africa. The biggest challenge that we have at the moment is very, very difficult to do business in South Africa because this corruption that is taking place is making it very difficult for us to compete globally, in the sense that almost 20 to 30% of whatever we are going to spend on procurement is leaking through out of the system through corruption. And that on its own is really affecting our ability to support small, medium enterprises and create employment that we so need in South Africa. And if you look at what happened in South Africa, in the past 15, 20 years, we were quite competitive in a lot of industries, more specifically the textile industry. Right now, a lot of whatever you are wearing is not made in South Africa. It's basically made in Indonesia or any other place except South Africa, mainly because of the fact that we are not competitive. And that on its own is robbing us the opportunity to create employment that we need for our people. And again, if we as the procurement professionals, we are not doing anything about this, we are not going to get to a point where we'll be able to resolve the problem. South Africa at the moment is looking for ethical leaders. And it's upon us, all of us who are participating in here, we need to do something about it. Of course, it's quite difficult to say that, we can be able to turn the tide in South Africa, but each and every one of us, if we walk out of here and we do our little bit, there's going to be quite a lot of contribution that we can be able to make to change the situation that we are in. Of course, in the areas where I'm working at the moment, some of my colleagues know exactly what we are doing. We are looking at different options in terms of how we can manage, the situation. And then again, for us, we are very lucky that we have got a group chief executive officer that is really intolerant in terms of unethical behavior. The tone from the top is very, very, very critical in the sense that you need to make sure that at least the top is clear in terms of what needs to be done. And in our environment, we have got zero tolerance to unethical behavior. And if we find that any one of our people are involved in any unethical behavior, it's only one way. You basically get out of the organization, because we cannot work with people like that. And of course, that starts with hiring the right people in the supply chain, because Lebo has indicated that in the past, supply chain was clerical, and then we obviously were capacitated by people that could not make it in HR or finance, and then they will be relegated to procurement. And at the moment, we've got our own people that are professionals, and I think we need to make sure that at least we are proud of who we are, and we do whatever we need to do to make sure that at least the organizations that we work for, they thrive in terms of making sure that we create employment in South Africa. And the other element that is very, very critical, colleagues, is to make sure that at least within your organization, you need to start to introduce the issues of lifestyle audit, where you are able to do the lifestyle audit for people working in supply chain. And it's not necessarily only people working in supply chain, like what I've indicated earlier on, that corruption takes place across the whole organization. And most of the time, the supply chain people that are there, they are so junior to a point that they are instructed in terms of what to do. And then we need to make sure that at least we do that across the whole organization. And the most important element, we need to professionalize our people that are working in procurement, like what CAs do. And you need to have a license for you to be able to operate as a procurement professional. If we are able to achieve that, colleagues, we are on our way to liberate ourselves. And in closure, in terms of my side, I would like just to ask you a question to say, look, one day in the near future, your grandchildren will ask you, what did you do during the time when there was looting and corruption taking place in South Africa? And more specifically, the people that are around the call, because we are directly involved in supply chain. What is going to be your answer? Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you, Bule. You are in fact raising a very pertinent, fact around top leadership in ensuring that we set the tone going forward in terms of not supporting corruption in organization. A very interesting, point that came out of the survey was that us as supply chain professionals are still reporting to CFOs. Now I'm talking about leadership now, and just really saying that, it is difficult for supply chain professionals to really eradicate corruption if it's still reporting to the CFO, and there is an expectation that supply chain should be reporting directly to the CEO. What is your view around that?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lebo. I think this has been a question that has been raised since our years when we were working for our previous organization in 2007, 2008. The way you report has a major influence in terms of the kind of influence that you have within the organization. Procurement, from where I'm sitting at the moment, procurement is really the engine of economic growth of South Africa. And from that point of view, we need to make sure that at least within the organization, we put it along all other C-suites, in the sense that it should be part of executive committee, and it should be the main contributor at the executive committee, because you are able to see back to back in terms of what is actually happening within the organization. And the current reporting structure in terms of procurement, from my point of view, I see that there's a bit of an anomaly that we need to correct as South Africa. Yes, I know that there's a requirement from the legislation in terms of the PFMA that procurement needs to report to finance. However, when you look at it, the way the importance of the function is as equal or if it's not better than other functions that normally sit at Exco. So from that point of view, Lebo, I believe strongly that we need to make sure that at least every time whenever we design the procurement operating model, we elevate it to be at the level of Exco, so that at least it can be able to add the value, that is expected from it. And again, we need to make sure that at least, because normally when you are equals, between yourselves and the operations director and the finance director, then you get to a level where you can be able to protect your people. And your people will never get a point where they are instructed to do certain things that are not ethical. And from that point of view, if we are able to achieve the option of elevating procurement to a C level, we would have done exceptionally well as South Africa. And it's something that we are really lobbying, with different industries as well as different departments to make sure that at least at the end of the day, we are able to see supply chain adding the value that is adding. I'm sure from time to time, Level, you've seen, what the AG is, indicating in terms of the irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful expenditure that we are experiencing in South Africa today. If we are able to cut on that, more specifically the fruitless and wasteful expenditure, then we can be able to go back and reinvest money back into the economy. And that on its own, there's a lot of value that it can bring to the economy of South Africa. Thank you.
It's really around, and just really just a point. How do we ensure that? And I mean, if you look at supply chain bullying, it's an end-to-end process, and really you affect each and every leader in the organization, from engineering to finance to the CEO, just about every stakeholder in the organization. How can we ensure that we draw them closer to supply chain to ensure that they become as ethical as we would ideally want to be? Because there's still that comment that keeps on cropping up, that supply chain and corruption doesn't happen within the procurement people. Yes, there is that tick that in certain instances, procurement people are involved. But however, what are we saying around other stakeholders in terms of the value chain? How do we ensure that ethical leadership still preside over them?
Thanks very much, Lebo. I think, look, from my point of view, the issue is about what value are you adding in the organization. That is the starting point. If all people within the organization are able to see the value add from procurement, in the sense that, one, you are able to save the money, and then two, the processes of procurement that you are running are transparent. Three, you are able to bring in service providers and suppliers that are able to deliver value to the organization. Four, you have people that are capable in terms of executing whatever you need to execute. Then from that point of view, you start to make sure that at least you sing for your supper on the executive table. And that on its own, it starts to become a little bit easier if you are able to add value. However, the bigger challenge that we have at the moment, as procurement, from time to time, we are entangled in transactional issues, and we are not able to see the bigger picture within the organization, and we are not able to really provide the strategic direction within the organization. And I'll tell you some of the stuff that procurement can do. If you look at what happened in the past 10 years, we had a lot of capital procurement projects that were taking place. And procurement was there, instructed by engineering in terms of what to do. However, the role that we could have played was to make sure that at least we do our planning in advance, we do our market research, so that at least we can provide guidance to the organization. And if we are able to do that, then from that point of view, that respect that we are looking for, you will be able to get it. And I think specifically from the private sector, I think the bigger challenge that you have there, procurement is more, in a lot of areas, is still more in the area where they are at that point that the engineering as well as the other functions, they are instructing procurement in terms of what to do. However, there are certain areas where you find that procurement has matured enough to a level where they are able to instruct or be able to talk to the business as equals, and be able to make sure that at least whenever they do their planning, their long-term planning, procurement is part of that. And when they do their budgeting, procurement is part of that. So in that area, one needs to make sure that at least going forward, you even bring in the element of demand planning and demand planning, which is really an element that is lacking in procurement today, because all the time we are reactive and we are not really getting an opportunity to think, in terms of what the organization would look for in the future, and we prepare for that in advance before we get to the point where we issue out RFPs or RFIs. So if you are able to do that, then the organization will be able to realize that there's value that they're getting from procurement, and therefore they will start to respect and treat procurement as an equal. Thank you.
The last question speaks to everyone. I've been told that us as leaders, as supply chain professionals, practitioners, academia, industry, our organization, we seem to be condoning corruption by being quiet. What is your view? And this is a question to everyone, not specifically to Vule. Are we really condoning it by keeping quiet? Because remember, we're talking about ethical leadership and the steps that that we should be taking going forward. Are we really condoning it? What is your view, colleagues? I shall start with yourself, Osias.
Good morning, Lebo, and good morning to the participants. You want to throw me to the deep end. My personal view is that we are not condoning it. However, we seem not to appear not to have a mandate to respond. There is an inherent fear from us, either as practitioners, as industry, probably as also professional bodies, that if we were to respond without a clear mandate from somewhere, issues get too quickly to be personalized, and they're no longer, as also professional, reflect the profession, but reflect the probably as also if we were to respond the individual. It's an embarrassing fact for us as practitioners and also as professionals, because people are now telling our story and telling people about our own daily experiences, telling people about our worldviews, telling people about our attitude towards ethics, which in my opinion is very wrong. So this panel discussion of today is a very, very important step for us as practitioners to try and get our word out there. I think for now, I will stop here and say that we are not condoning it, but we are not saying anything about it. And we need, at the end of today's discussion, to have a clear mindset on how to respond when the profession is under attack. I'll talk some more when I come in later.
All right. Thank you, Osias, around that.
About it and
Someone's line is bad.
you can go ahead, Lebo, you are unmuted now.
Okay, Osias. Okay, thank you, Osias. You can mute on your side. Hemant, if you can just pick up from the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Lebo. Good morning to everyone. So I don't think we're condoning it. I think, to Osias's point, we haven't been mandated. I think, even if you look at this platform, we're actually speaking out against it. We've taken cognizance of everything that's going on in the space. There's numerous examples that we highlight and we constantly use to actually speak about the issue. Now, we haven't really targeted any individual, but I think the law must also take its course, And what I believe is that through more advocacy, we're going to diffuse this behavior, and we have to step in the right direction and make procurement professionalized, but also the strategic imperative that it deserves. Procurement can add so much of value. It's an economic transformative imperative for the country. And I also believe, this is really a test of our social capital. Ethics and corruption is not just white collar crime. It happens everywhere. If you buy a Coke to the JMPD officer that stops us in the N1, that's actually going against our ethical moral fiber. That's wrong. So we should stop all of that behavior. And ultimately, our country has been given a reputation that we don't deserve. We fought so hard for democracy, equal rights. We fought so hard against HIV. We've even fought so hard against COVID-19, and this is just another thing that we need to fight hard against. I do believe we can do more, but I also think we must stop protecting people, and start organizations need to deal with them, and then I think professional bodies and other institutes can also then take the stance and bar members, etc., or just revoke licenses to practice. But it has to be a tiered approach. If I look at what's going on in the Zondo Commission, it's really about understanding the structural malpractices. It's digging really deep to find out where does it really start. We're not just taking one individual and dealing with it. This is systematic. It is quite embedded, and it's going on for many years, decades. And I think it's a deep-seated issue that needs to be addressed. And then, we'll be given a bigger voice to actually handle it with a bit more intensity.
All
Thanks,
right.
Neville.
Thank you, Hemant. I'm going to park this discussion now because we're still going to have some question and answered. And for all the attendees, I'm noting all your questions. They would definitely be answered around this. And I will urge the panelists to also ensure that they look at all the questions that speaks directly to themselves so that they can respond where necessary. So colleagues, thank you, colleagues, for that. Thank you, Vule, for your insight and explaining to us what ethical leadership really speaks to and what we should be doing. So colleagues, our next speaker right now is Mr. Hemant Harilal, and from SIPS. And what Hemant will be discussing this morning is really around how are we supposed to be conducting ourselves as supply chain professionals in procurement, and explaining to us what is this code of good practice and a view on leadership and decision making in our organization. So he will share with us in terms of what his view is with regards to code of good practice, what does it really mean, and how it can be asked. And in between, Hemant, I will ask you some of the questions that are coming from the industry, and what is it, and how we can basically apply the code of good practice in procurement. Thank you.
I think, let me just take this from the top. So it's apparent we live and operate in a world where everything is connected, and understanding the impact of our sourcing and buying decisions has never been so important. So the concept of ethics and responsible procurement is not new, but the increase in global and cross-border sourcing has highlighted several serious issues that must be addressed. Ethical and responsible procurement is now an economic and reputational imperative, and in many contexts, it's becoming a legal requirement too. I think all over the world, we see governments and consumers that are increasingly aware of such issues and are supporting, if not demanding, that businesses act to implement ethical sourcing programs. We know organizations will suffer reputational damage if they found to be sourcing from suppliers which use exploitative labor, for example. Companies may face legal sanctions if the suppliers are found to be involved in corruption or bribery. And we also will find lots of staff facing criminal prosecution for involvement with fraud, corruption, bribery, and even where this happens offshore, for instance. So the negative impacts can be really costly, and to organizations, to our economy, and ultimately to our country. And I strongly believe there's no reason why commercial and ethical goals can't go hand in hand. In fact, tying the initiatives back to commercial benefits often helps the case for change. So I couldn't agree with Vule more. Ultimately, leaders should set the tone for ethical practices, walk the talk, as we would say. Leaders should adopt the code of conduct and deal with transgressions, and ultimately walk away from ill-intended practices. So in our fast-paced, dynamic world, leaders must create awareness and what constitutes a bribe, what is corruption harmful to business, and sometimes that common knowledge is not understood, or it's easily to misinterpret that. And if I look at how South Africa has dealt with other issues, and I spoke about HIV earlier in the 1990s and 2000, we had billboards everywhere, information on hand. We need to almost do the same when it comes to corruption and open up the dialogue into all levels. So the code of conduct, and I can really speak to the SIPS code of conduct, and the purpose of this code is to define behaviors and actions which SIPS members and any other organization must commit to maintain as long as they are members. And it's really to enhance and protect the standing of the profession around procurement. It's there to promote the eradication of unethical business practices the code really sets out to maintain the highest standard of integrity in all relationships. It enhances the proficiency and stature of the profession, and it ensures full compliance with the law. So what this really does, it sets out the rules of engagement, and it tells, the organizational takes an ethical standpoint, and it tells suppliers or would-be suppliers, this is our rules of engagement. You either play according to this or you don't play at all. And I think it's important for organizations to set this out on the onset, before suppliers even start engaging with them or talking around contracts. It's basically what the organization stands for. And I think what we've also developed, SIPS has also developed a corporate code of ethics. And this is a commitment to reinforce ethical values across procurement and supply practices. And this is completely voluntary and could be adopted by all organizations across the world, any size and any sector. And it sets out the values, the business culture and practices the organizations must demonstrate. Let me leave it there, level.
Okay. Herman, that's very interesting. I've been talking about the code of good practice and what it means for us in the procurement fraternity. My question to you is that as much as we're talking about code of good practice in procurement, what about other stakeholders? Should it be only applicable to supply chain professionals, or should it be inclusive to the organization as a whole?
Absolutely not exclusive to supply chain professionals. And that's a very good question. I think it's the entire organization. This is the ethos of the way the company conducts itself. So corporate ethics, if I were to take it by definition, is a set of principles that guide the way your organization conducts itself with its dealings. And that dealings is with customers, suppliers, employees, regulators, contractors, staff. It could be anyone. And by creating a set of established principles, an organization is publicly declaring its intent to behave in a certain way. And this particular way is ethically. And I think everybody needs to subscribe to this. It's lost if it's just a subset of the organization. And I really love what Vule said, is there's a CEO is intolerant to these malpractices. So everyone in the organization understands that tone, and every single touch point. So it's certainly across supply chains. And it's also within support functions as well.
Okay, no, that's good. But my question as well is that I always come up with all this creative thinking around what we should be doing to get everyone to comply. But at the same time, and I'm just thinking the possibility of certain contracts being changed in organization. For an example, if you want to apply, to employ a supply chain professional in the organization, is it an option to get them to sign a code of good practice as part of their contractual obligation, just to really say that, I will abide to this ethos of the organization, and should I be found wanting, then I will get into trouble, and what it will definitely mean for me as a professional. What are your views around that?
I think it's a fantastic idea. I don't think we do enough of that. The upfront contracting would be employees to subscribe to our code of conduct and the way we do things is probably a much better step than dealing with the issue when it has already transpired, and it takes a long time to prove these cases, etc. So you then get also what you have is an influx of people that subscribe to this code of good conduct, and it's almost there to drive out and diffuse the toxic behavior from others, which I think is a fantastic idea. It's proactive, and I definitely think it's worth it.
Yes. All right. No, that is awesome. It will be interesting to hear what industries think really around that, because in the absence of everything that we have, things like contracts are the things that can be changed, and things that us as industry, as organization, can start implementing to ensure that we start putting measures up front to really protect our profession as it is and where it stands currently. The other things that I want to tap into, and Kamkhelo, maybe you can just add on to this, it's really around procurement committees. There's adjudicating committees as well that speaks to the decision making that's happening in organization. My question is, will this make a difference if we have all the members that sits in the adjudication committee going through a code of good practice, as well as people that will be signing off before they can be placed in committees like those? What do you think around it?
Thank you very much, Lebo, and I agree with Ndate Hemand and Ndate Vole as well. So a few years ago, we introduced almost an internal code of ethics for one of the organizations that I used to work for, that anybody else that gets involved in one way or the other in supply chain processes, they must sign and declare their interest, agree that they will behave in a manner that is aligned to the code of ethics of supply chain, and regardless of who you are. So for an example, if you are signing a request to procure, that request to procure says, I do declare that I do not have any interest, personal interest to gain on this request, because sometimes we wait for the process to end to know the suppliers and then say, hey, no, I don't know the suppliers, right? Which is right at the end of the process. So whether you get involved as a requester, you get involved in evaluation, you get involved in adjudication, and not even forget that things go wrong in contract management as well. So those that get involved in contract management as well, where the many loopholes, the big black holes are, they need to sign that when you get appointed as a project manager, you also declare and sign the code of ethics and also declare your interest, because that's where many things go wrong. So I fully agree that anybody that gets involved in supply chain processes, they need to sign that code of ethics and declare their interest upfront, not after the fact. And it's the same thing that SAPIX also does in terms of their code of ethics. It does not only apply to the executive or the board or ESCO, but it also applies to all stakeholders, including suppliers as well. And that's what we see the procurement bill is also trying to introduce as well, that the department, the code of ethics goes beyond just procurement professional, but it must be signed and declared by all interested parties in the value chain.
I'm glad that you're bringing about an element of the service providers also signing off that code of good practice, because like I always say that, there's a corruptor and a corruptee. And either way, both of them are involved in the process as well. So it's always very crucial to make sure that both the organization that is awarding contracts and whoever is receiving the contract is also signing off in terms of code of good practice. I think the advice out there, obviously for organizations and for individuals that are not even aware of it, that's one of the solutions if they have not implemented that. Maria, I can't see your face, but I know that, as part of the, of the dialogues that we have as well, you have also indicated how much, the paperwork is fed into organization in terms of signing off, in terms of due diligence and so forth. And I'm bringing this element of due diligence, colleagues, around this conversation in that if we speak to code of good practice and we get in the service providers to sign off, then I'm gonna just bring an element of vetting as well. That, as procurement professionals, I still question our ability to really do proper vetting and probity studies with regards to the service providers that you're dealing with. I'm still saying we don't know who we are doing business with. And I'm going to pack it there. I think we still just do not know who we are doing business with. What is the advice out there for the industry, colleagues?
Lebo, I think, you're asking a very good question, and it's a question that has been really a big challenge in the procurement fraternity for some time now. if you look at the process that we follow, we've got a very, I mean, in general, in procurement, we've got a very good process from the beginning of the RFP up to the end. And when we get to the contracting, we do have some probitis check that we do, and they are, to a certain extent, they are effective. And you get to a point where you understand who the people are that you are doing business with. But the challenge, I think, the question that we need to ask is, once these people have come into the system, who is checking to see who the people are? Because part of what we do, we check the last day before we take the request for approval of an award, to the governing structures. We check and we know who the people are. But the contract is running for 5 years, and there is no system that goes back to check periodically to see who our suppliers are. And that is really where the bigger problem is. But from the beginning, it's not really a big problem. I think, a lot of companies are able to tell you who the people are. And, we can be able to do, and there are companies that are available to assist in terms of doing probitis check. But I think the bigger challenge that I have is the fact that you would find that from, the day when the contract was entered into, these were the shareholders or these were the directors of the company. But, 3 years, 4 years down the line, when corruption or some, issues happen within the contract, you'd find that the people that were given the contract are no longer part of that agreement, or they are no longer part of that company. So part of what I think we need to think about is to say, how do we continuously manage, our suppliers to an extent that until the end of the work that they need to do, we know who they are. Currently there's a process like what I said that, can assist us in terms of, checking them before we contract. But once we have contracted, I don't think that we've got systems that assist us in terms of that. Thanks very much, Lebo.
Thank you, Vule. I always said that when you sit out there and you look at the industry and look at the service providers and supply chain, the whole end-to-end process, I find that we have seen with a lot of service providers that, putting up a profile is like putting a CV. So when you put the CV and you put the references there, they put references that they know and just say that we have done business with you for so many years already. So I always catch a question, and I'm just being, on the negative side now, Vule, to really say that it looks like it's not substantial. It's not enough, because we can always be taken, out of context, taken for a ride as well, with someone putting up their own reference checks as well. Like if you have a CV, you are looking for a job, who do you select? Someone that you are good buddies with, probably not the manager that hates you enough to really say that you're not performing. So I think that's one of the challenges also that we are seeing, when we speak to vetting and we're talking about probity studies as well, and really doing this linking in the industry. So Maria, you had your hand up on your side with regards to this topic. Anything there?
Yes, Lebo, if I could just say, I think we're fortunate that we deal with some international organizations, and I think we can learn from them. The procurement industry has matured internationally over the periods. We see some of it coming from the state-owned entities in South Africa as well, where before you even participate in an RFP, you do an RFI. And they go through quite an extensive list of questions that you have to respond to. And they actually ask for proof that you have certain things in place, like code of ethics, like what training do you provide your staff, and all the rest of it. So even before you're allowed to participate in a tender, those are the hurdles that you have to overcome. And just to on the point where if you contract with a company today, we have found in the past that it sort of slipped through the cracks in the last couple of years, that with certain state-owned entities that we actually had annual audits to make sure that everything that we committed to or what we said was in place is actually still in place. And I think to maybe add value as procurement professionals is to make sure that we do include some annual audits, especially if it's a long-term, quite extensive contract, to go and do an audit and see, is everything still in place? Are we still dealing with the same owners? Are they still continuing with making sure that they stick to their code of ethics? We even had instances with international companies where they come and when they do an audit, they can select people that they want to talk to. So we've got no choice in that, just to make sure whatever we're saying is actually credible and that we are doing that.
All right, thank you, colleagues, for that insight. Herman, thanks a lot for your input around that. Colleagues, any questions for Herman, please make sure that you raise them, and we'll ensure that with our question and answer session is able to respond to them. Herman is currently the Managing Director of Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply in South Africa, and he's responsible for the Sub-Saharan Africa. I know, Herman is more of an engineer, isn't it, Herman? So, I like emphasizing that the way supply chain is such a beautiful profession, we're seeing engineers also coming on our side. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, colleagues, just a reminder, and just to inform you, you will see there will be a pop-up screen that's coming on your laptops, on your phones, wherever you have connected. It's a poll. We're trying to get some data, some facts, some information. Please just remember to respond to the poll that we're sending through to you. We would like to really see the results, and we will really share all the results with yourself. It's really a good insight to see a supply chain professional where you are, and also remember the poll is anonymous. I have seen that with the petition that we ran and the survey that we ran, most individuals has been scared to really participate. I have to really indicate that all of this work that you are doing is it is anonymous, so your name is not going to be there. We're just getting the results, and we will definitely share with yourself. And you can always use that information within your organization as well. And some of you are probably studying as well from the research perspective. You can always use that. All right, thank you, Herman. As we move on in terms of our dialogue, now we move towards academia. Mr. Ngube, on your side, you have to share with us what academia's role is in really driving the issues that affects the proactive gaps to research and solutions and capacity developing programs. In a couple of years, when we sit there and we're discussing, and there's always a question is that, is academia producing the students that we want in supply chain? And there's always a narrative that there is a huge gap that exists. Maybe not that huge, I'm exaggerating, but there's a gap that exists and it can always be sorted out. There's a gap that exists between what industry requires and what academia is really offering at this point in time. That is one, but at the same time, we know the role of academia in terms of research and really supporting us in finding solutions. So if you can just share with us in terms of the academia's mandate, specifically in identifying all the research problems, and the research problem that you are dealing with currently, and what solutions can we have to the country, obviously, and we want to get to that element as well, and what research exists out there that we can take forward and utilize to our advantage to ensure that the leadership approach that we are taking will be objective and we'll be able to get the best results that we require. You can take over now.
Thank you, Lebo, and thank you for inviting me to join this panel. I will try and contextualize my responses with respect to the academia, just to focus on the supply chain as a profession and as a practice. I think when you look at the role of academia, is really fivefold. The first one, which is of paramount importance, is to create that pipeline of competent and skilled human capital to the industry. So that is seen through the programs that academia will offer. The second part is that for those that are on the exit part of those programs, they do conduct research as part of the exit requirements of those modules. And that research typically reflects a problem that they're experiencing in their own work front. So as academia is then to preside in the supervision of that research to make sure that the student, when they exit, they actually come out with a solution that potentially can be implementable in their own workspace. So that's the second part that I think academia plays a significant role. The third part is really being potentially a strategic partner as a training partner in dealing with addressing customized needs of business. And that is usually governed through a formal agreement or an MOU between academic institutes and the industry partner that they are servicing. The one area where I am personally passionate about is when academia creates safe spaces for multiple stakeholder engagements to discuss issues that affect the supply chain, both as a profession and as a practice. And I've organized quite a few of those in the past where I've hosted either a panel discussion of this nature or a public lecture by a renowned supply chain specialist to address specific issues. And that is extremely good because it takes people away from a transactional relationship more to an open space where we can engage openly and discuss issues without actually attaching labels. And academia needs to continue playing that role and magnify that role because it is a safe space and then things are easy to come out, especially if those that are participating and responding are really anonymized and protected so that what they reveal is really about value adding and enhancing the quality of the discussion. I think the last part is really where, in my opinion, I felt that as academia, we have really failed. Mostly it's really to be a strategic partner with both industry and government to address issues at a high level, at a leadership level. We do conduct research that focuses on those issues at individual levels, either driven by individual professors with their student population. And the outcome of those type of researches normally gets to be disseminated or shared in an academic environment, meaning academic journals. And more often, the time that it takes to get the research outcome to the public domain takes longer because of the stages of moderation, peer review, and so forth. That by the time it comes out, it may no longer be aligned to the realities on the ground. It may take a year, it may take 2 years for it to come to the public domain. And therefore, for it to be translated to adding value either to industry or to practice, there is that delay. And that's the first challenge. But it is a critical role that academia plays. But we just need to sort of reflect on how best can we package those outcomes such that they can speedily be translated into implementable actions, either for government or for industry. So at a high level, I would say that these are the 5 roles. One, on programs focusing on capacity development. Secondly, on research focused on specific, context-specific situations by students doing research. Thirdly, on these open spaces that allow people to come and respond. Fourthly, to be a strategic partner on customized programs. And lastly, to be a strategic partner for government and industry to deal with broader questions. I think in your introduction, you have raised some very pertinent questions. The first one is really around the mandate with respect to the problems that are researched and how they align with the country's challenges. In the last 10 years or so, it has been very clear from higher education and probably the Research Foundation as a directive that most of the research effort done by academic institutes need to address issues that are of concern from a country's perspective as informed by the national development. The NDP as an example, for instance, with respect to Africa, looking at Agenda 2063 as a guiding document in trying to align the research and solutions to what faces the continent. At a global level, for instance, the SDGs then provide that template to guide what kind of research academia should do. Each academic institute then will reorient themselves by looking at streamlined research focus area, which will then guide the activities of those institutes. So to just give you a simple answer, yes, the mandate that we have as Academic Institute for Research is really to address what has been identified as a country issue through a formal document. You have raised an interesting issue in terms of the perceived tension between what we claim as academia to be the competencies of those exiting the academic space and the receiving arm in terms of the employers, in terms of the capabilities that are displayed on the job. And it is true that at times there is a disconnect. And when we look at us in terms of the programs that we offer as academic institute, they range from focal areas. We have got the commerce degrees, you have got the diplomas, you have got the engineers, especially the industrial engineering component coming into the supply chain profession. You have got operations research and management science coming through to the supply chain profession. So in terms of the integrated end-to-end skill set, potentially we may not have a graduate that exhibits all of those skills. The graduates will be more or less packaged according to their specialization. So it is true then that there will be those pockets of not 100% completion in terms of skill set. And I think as academic institutes, we need to have a broader conversations with the professional bodies to see how do we then complement each other to do wraparound, tailor-made professional development programs that are able to uplift the exiting graduates to a high level of proficiency. I think in that regard, you'll understand and observe that quite a few academic institutes are directly talking to the professional bodies now, putting MOUs in place to see how do we then complement each other's efforts to make sure that at least out there, we've got a capable, ethical, and efficient supply chain practitioner. In our case, as a business school, we've been part and parcel of the clamor for supply chain practitioners to access the C-suite. But we do recognize that for them to get there, they also need to bring other skills that are beyond supply chain to the C-suite arena. And therefore, pathways for them to do the MBAs, the MBLs, the executive development programs that then widen their skill set so that they can practice as C-suite executives becomes important. And in that regard, we have MOUs in place. Some of them are going through revision now with supply chain practitioners that have got a professional designation, and then to use that as an access to an MBA or an MBL. Then when they get those opportunities to practice a C-suite, they are able to be comparable from a capability, from a worldview, from a value enablement with other C-suite executives. And that's one area that at a personal level I'm passionate about, and I see it is receiving a lot of traction from most of our senior supply chain executives to try and broaden that skill set. And in that aspect, we are able then to now touch base with these issues of ethics, governance, sustainability, and how they should manifest themselves on the ground, and how we as supply chain practitioners, profession, and executives can respond to the ethical challenge. As an academician, I'm always worried about the term corruption when it gets to be directed at us as practitioners, because of what has already been highlighted before by the previous speakers, that more often we find people in our space that do not have our required qualifications. Therefore, more often, lack of knowledge and lack of capability may result in deviant behavior. But if that is the case, I think the appropriate approach is to identify the missing skill set and then put them on a developmental pathway. So that's where I've tended mostly to lean to say, what is your current supply chain skills profile? What is it that you are lacking? How can we then direct to to enhance your current skills to be able to be sufficiently capacitated to deal with supply chain issues. I do take cognizance of the fact that the previous speakers have raised the issue of moral compass, and it is true that, especially given what is in the public domain now, some of our people appear to be well qualified, both from an executive perspective, because they do have the MBAs, and also at times from a professional perspective, because they can show a pathway of professional qualifications leading to enhanced set skills. So if then they are caught up in these issues of deviations, ethical malpractices, then it is really a moral compass issue. It is really an integrity issue. And then it probably widens the debate to broader, to say, as a society, what is our attitude towards integrity? What are our value systems? But as a profession, then that's why we want to talk about professionalization and what it means to us all together. And I'm happy that today we do have SIPs on board and we do have SAPICs on board, because as academic institutes, we do not want to be choosing an alliance. We want to be looking at supply chain as a discipline. But as a discipline, we recognize that there are uniqueness in the end-to-end from a professionalization point of view. And we want our students, our exiting graduates, to have access to both professional bodies. So this conversation becomes critical then, that to us as a collective, what does professionalization mean? And I think for me, it means having one set of unique standards that we can all commit to. And when we respond as a body to anyone who deviates from it, and the voice, the position is unison. The position is uniform. I think this is what I'm hoping we should be able to achieve in the near future. And to that regard, as academic institutes, we always like to facilitate those safe spaces where, as professional bodies, we can come, meet, and discuss these things, because ultimately they need to trickle down to us in terms of capacity development, that the standards are uniform, the standards are shared by all in the fraternity. I think, Lebo, in terms of probably introduction and setting the scene, this is what I can say, but I can have some further questions from you to address.
Osias, thank you. Really around that. My question to you is that if you were to look at the program content at this point in time, which specific areas do we need to start focusing on? You know, if you were to highlight some few areas that's really going to lead us to proper leadership and proper supply chain and world-class supply chain that we are looking at, what is it exactly that we should be looking at?
I think we should not compromise on the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are really the technical skills, the business skills, and the people skills. Those ones we should not compromise. So any supply chain program should reflect those. But today we're talking about leadership. And when we talk about leadership, right from the onset, the biggest responsibility for leaders is really around corporate governance and ethics. And when you reflect and assess the current programs that we have, I think the level of opportunities given to ethics and corporate governance oriented modules, I think it is limited. And this is one area that needs to be enhanced significantly. But over and above it being enhanced, I'm uncomfortable that if it is dealt with generically, I think we need to tie it then to those set of standards that the professional body is driving, such that when we respond, I think we need to respond in unison. That's why the conversation that we had earlier on with both Hamed and Hamhelo around what the two professional bodies have around ethics and code of conduct becomes critical. We want to harmonize those and make sure that those they are then infused into that curriculum that speaks around ethics and governance. Then when they exit, they are already tailor-made to practice in that well-defined context. So I think that one for me will be the one that I feel is extremely lacking now. I know we have it in MBAs, but MBAs are generalist degrees. They're not supply chain specialist qualifications. So we need to make sure that we migrate some of that content to talk to the supply chain practitioner directly. I think the last set of skills really is the issue around the digital skills and the kind of vulnerabilities that the lack of creates for a leader. You spoke about vetting as an example. And when you look at the level of adaptness by hackers and cyber terrorists out there, they can really artificially create profiles that on vetting appear to be credible, and decisions are made on the basis of those. But when you get to the actual relationship and the execution of the relationship, you find that your experiences on the ground and what you had utilized for vetting purposes is chalk and cheese. So the digital skills need to come in force, and these ones need to cut through from the foundational level all the way to the leadership level. So the new set of programs, as far as the evolution of supply chain and supply chain maturity is concerned, they have to include ethics and governance, and they have to include a very, very increased digital capability. Jan, what ma'am?
Some of us sometimes become technologically impaired, eh?
That's why I'm talking about digital skills.
Yes, and you're talking about digital skills right now. But my next question is really around, if you look at the incumbents that are coming into the space of supply chain, do you find more engineers, people from other fraternities being more excited to learn about supply chain, of the levers in their organizations? Or do you see more supply chain professionals, the practitioners, being the ones that are excited and interested to know about our profession?
It's actually surprising that most of the excitement and the willingness to embrace the changing dynamics of supply chain is coming more from the engineering and science type of graduates. And I'm still battling to get a better understanding why. I do suspect that because foundationally, they already come with inherent analytical and problem-solving skills that make them adept to adapt to any situation. When we come to our own vertical development of supply chain practitioners, there is a sense that there is repeatability in module content as they go up the ladder. And I think as academic institutes, we really need to look at those distinctions. Although we do use these NQF level as indicators of what kind of competence should you display on exit. But when you look at the actual content, there is a perception that the content is repeated. That's why now it is important that from a leadership point of view, the other softer skills need to come on board to the curriculum. Skills like coaching and mentoring, the ones that we've been championing, because they are non-existent in our curriculum at the moment. Yes. And the skills really around relationship and relationship management, stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management, because those, from now to the future, those will be the key vantage points for enhancing value. They will be based on collaborations and on how we manage relationships. So we need to bring those type of skills more and more into the curriculum. But yes, from an excitement point of view, I don't know whether engineers and scientists have got an oracle of some sort that they can see to the future, but they've embraced the supply chain phases, and their willingness to adapt and prepare themselves to face those challenges is quite commendable. It means that we're not doing enough in terms of professional development for those that come from a non-science and non-engineering point of view. There seems to be less appetite. Thank you.
All right. just two areas. It's very interesting talking about the engineer. There's someone that has put on the chat, Vashner. I mean, Vash is saying that I'm an engineer, professional engineer who has practiced for 10 years and in supply chain for the last 14 years. And he loves the aspect of supply chain that forms the framework for value chain optimization throughout all the aspects of the business. So can you see? I mean, it also comes to what you are saying, that we see more engineers, scientists, and so forth really coming through to enroll in the supply chain. But I want to touch a very important aspect here. Earlier, I indicated that we have always been clerical, and being clerical comes with having people that were not supply chain professionals, like nurses. If you're a teacher or whoever, and they say that, listen, you don't fit as an engineer, let's put you. You don't teach fit as an HR person, let's put you in supply chain. It's just an administrative job. So I know that a lot of organizations are seated with such individuals, and they have already acquired obviously some skills, some experience around it. There's always an element of recognition for prior learning as well. That comes with really saying that how do we elevate the skills of this person they've been in the role. Probably we can turn them around as proper, but probably some of them, you know, they're not even interested in understanding supply chain. So I really want to tap on the industry side right now, and maybe Vule, if I can bring you into the picture around that. I mean, I know that it's the biggest challenge that we're having in the industry, that we have certain individuals that just don't understand supply chain, and that's the least they're in fact interested, so that when they're taken to task, they say, oh, I didn't know, I don't have the skills, I don't have the competencies, or whichever it may be. So if you can just tap onto that on your side, Vule, and Herman from your side, then also your side from Kambogelo. I think it's from the professional body perspective to really saying that, are we, you know, we talk about recognition of prior learning and having some of these individuals coming from corporates. How much are they now instilled in getting to understand the supply chain sector? Vule, I will start with yourself.
Thanks very much, Lebo. But maybe before getting to answer the question, you know, there are some few comments that I just need to make, you know, from the presentation or from the discussion from Mr. Ngube. I think from, you know, where we are sitting as an industry, you know, there's still a gap that we see in terms of the graduates that are coming from university and the expectations from, you know, their first job. You know, part of the things that are, you know, difficult are the issues like strategic sourcing and ethics. You know, we basically find that they are coming short in terms of that. However, you know, to the contrary, in terms of digital skills, they are doing exceptionally well. In terms of communication, they are top notch. In terms of stakeholder management, you know, they are struggling. And then I think, you know, that on its own, you know, it starts to, you know, give you some understanding in terms of what are the things that the academia need to focus on. You know, at the moment, we talk about what are the challenges that we have within procurement and supply chain today. And the academia, you know, they obviously have introduced, or they have included the challenges that we've had within supply chain, you know, environment, you know, in 2005 and 2007. You know, those are no longer challenges. We are dealing with a different enemy today. So from that point of view, I think part of what we need to do, if you look at the graduates from HR and or finance, when they get out of university and then they go to their first job, you know, they are pretty much there. They are possibly 40, 50% ready. Whereas ours, you know, I find that they are almost like around about 20 to 30% ready. If you get them 40% ready, you are very, very lucky. So, you know, we need to make sure that at least maybe, you know, we get the people from the industry to interact with the academia, so that at least whenever they are, you know, developing their curriculum, you know, the curriculum will obviously take the challenges that are, you know, current, you know, within the industry. And over and above that, I think part of what we need to do, we might need to make sure that at least from time to time, once in a while, the industry needs to go there and then, you know, maybe talk to the, you know, final year students, so that at least they can start to bridge that gap. Because, you know, unfortunately, the textbook that we are reading in supply chain, they are basically, you know, written by academia, and, you know, most of the academia people, then they don't necessarily come from the industry. They basically do the desktop, and then from there they tell you that this is how things are supposed to be done. it's quite difficult to learn how to ride a bicycle by watching a video. So you need to be on top of the bicycle so that at least you can have a feel. And from my point of view, I think, as an industry, we need to make sure that at least we help academia by ensuring that we give them some of the hints in terms of what are the skills that we are looking for during this period. And the skills that we are looking for today, they are not necessarily going to be the same skills that we will need in the next 5 years, given the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has given us the new normal, in the sense that going forward, if you are not automated, in your environment as procurement, you are going to struggle to do business effectively. So from that point of view, we obviously need to make sure that at least we anticipate what are the new skills that we will need in our environment, so that we start to include them in the curriculum. And then by the time when they graduate, finish from the university, and then they go to the work environment, that opportunity, there are skills that they have, and they knew, challenges that we have, they just, cross each other at the right time. So to answer your other question in terms of the people that are in supply chain, and then those ones that don't understand, earlier on, there was a question that was raised by one of the participants in terms of that. I think for me, the bigger challenge that we have there is the fact that, there are certain things that we call back to basics, and I think there are people, we always say, you go back to basics, like as if these people knew the basics. And there are some of the people that are in procurement, more specifically, the ones that migrated from other functions, and then they are given a specific role within procurement, and then they are taught what they are supposed to deliver in that role. You find that they don't know the basics, and then from there they get promotion to another level. And on that aspect, I think part of what we need to do, the retraining in terms of the basics. And over and above that, we obviously need to work with the industry bodies like CEPICS, like SIPS, and all other industry bodies, so that at least we can design programs that are quite specific to our own environment, so that we can be able to get our people to be at the level where they understand the basics. And over and above that, they need to understand, why am I doing this? Because some of the people are told that you have to do the analysis in terms of it, but they don't know why they're doing that. So from that point of view level, I think it's very critical that we need to look at what are the bare minimum that each and every person in supply chain or in procurement, what are the bare minimum skills that they need to possess, and then make sure that we put that in place, so that periodically we get our people to go through the process. Because unfortunately, when people are in that environment, you can't say that, look, because you don't understand this, you have to go, we have to take you out. But we need to work out a way of how we can be able to make them competent. And that we can only be able to do by identifying the gaps and make sure that at least we design intervention programs that will be able to assist us in terms of getting them to the level that we want them to be at. Thanks, Lebo.
Thank you, Vule. I think you've already also spoken on behalf of the professionals. And I will, what I would do is, when we obviously have additional commentaries and so forth, if there's anything to add, both Kamokhale and Hemant can add some input around that. Before I move on to the next speaker, colleagues, I just want to say that when I look at the panelists, there's a mathematician, there's 3 engineers. I just don't know about Maria, and Maria will tell us, which area is she coming from. I'm a supply chain person who started as doing purchasing and ended up logistics and supply chain. So it will be interesting when I introduce Maria, then she must tell us which side is she on, on her side. But we have 3 engineers, 1 mathematician, 1 supply chain person, and we'll just hear from Maria, colleagues, as to which side is she coming from. So colleagues, Ozias, thanks a lot for such insight and the input, colleagues, from your side. Ozias is a senior lecturer at the Graduate School of Business Leadership, UNISA, focusing in supply chain management. Most of you know him as one of the advocates that we have in supply chain, very passionate around supply chain, looking at operations, a whole lot of research as well. He's got a lot of experience in terms of procurement, logistics, and the entire operations and project management. Thank you, Ozias, for that. Then our next panelist is Ms. Maria Duprieu. Ms. Maria is a Business Development Director from Bidvest International Logistics. and has been a regional director for Gauteng. She has served on the SAPICS board between 2014 and 2015. Currently, she is the chairperson of the SAF Gauteng and SAF board member as well. Maria, if you can just share on our side, I mean, right now where we are, we're coming from various industry as professionals, as professional bodies as well. We're coming from industry yourself. And what we are saying that in terms of supply chain leadership, what is required out there is to really have an integrated approach in terms of how we want to cap corruption, how we want to ensure that we have leadership in all aspects of supply chain. If you can just share with us around that, but also if you can also share with us an element that speaks to early warnings that we require for the service providers and the procurement professionals. And I'll just elaborate just a bit, colleagues, in that. When we're speaking of early warnings, I know that a lot of, a couple of procurement professionals have always raised an element that, you know what, I'm being put under pressure by my manager or by the CEO or whichever it may be. How do I deal with this? Because I feel that my life is jeopardized in that environment. But there's also a service provider that's seated on the other side that say, listen, I need business. I want to make a life for my family, for my life at this point in time. But you know what? Labor wants me to buy a bribe, to pay a bribe of 10,000 per month, or Labor wants me to pay for her kids' school fees, or take her on a holiday, or buy her a flight ticket to the Bahamas, whichever it may be. How do we deal with that? What early warnings approaches can we really provide in areas like that? But also at the same time, how can we really integrate this? I think we've already said that part of us having this dialogue is really having that integrated approach, SIPs, SAPICS, academia, industry as a whole, because this is the start where we are currently. So how do we really take this forward and ensure that there's a full drive in what we are aiming to achieve? And also, if you can share with us what industry is already doing that is pertinent to this environment. And you can tell us first where you fall. Are you an engineer as well or not?
I'm not an engineer. I'm a generalist, jack of all trades. But I'm married to an engineer. My son is an engineer, so I'm surrounded by engineers. I have very early in my career realized the value of what engineers can bring to the supply chain industry. So in our own organization, the first chance I got, I surrounded myself with engineers. But I think the reason why engineers are crucial to the supply chain industry is that they've got the ability to see the whole flow, and it's the systems thinking. I think it's part of the engineering training that makes them very successful in the procurement environment and in the supply chain environment. They can see from start to finish. They just have this analytical ability that really adds so much value to the profession. It's a pity we can't have engineers all around, but we need other people as well, generalists like myself, that sometimes prompt them in the right way and tell them that life is not just all straight lines, that it's not just black and white. There's lots of grayness in life as well. So from that side, I think that's where I see that. As I'm a generalist, I've been in the clearing and forwarding industry all my life, been involved with a lot of supply chain optimization exercises. In my current role, business development, I also head up the tender team for our organization, and obviously have a keen interest in the supply chain and what happens there. I was asked the question to see if there's an integrated approach to curbing corruption. I don't believe that there currently is, and it depends with which entities you are dealing with. And I think it's quite important. You find that some of the corporates, and particularly listed entities, have a lot more structure, a lot more processes and procedures in place to make sure that it's not that easy to do the wrong stuff. But at the end of the day, you can have as much processes and procedures in place. It boils down to the individuals, because individuals will always try and find ways and means protect themselves and to, if they want, if it's not part of their moral fiber, as we've been talking, it can even, they find ways to work around all those processes and procedures that are in place. So what organizations need to do is they need to make sure that they are able to identify how, when these things take place. There's been a lot of discussion about and mention that it's got to come from the top. Integrity and ethical leadership from the top. If it's not authentic, if it's just words, then it's not going to work in any organization. And it really has to start at the top and end at the bottom. And it's not just for the procurement professionals, it's for every single employee and every single person in the organization, because there's just so many areas where corruption and unethical behavior can take place. So I know we're discussing supply chain and procurement today, but it is all round. It starts at the top. It should be a management responsibility. We spoke about a code of ethics. It's all good and well to put stuff in writing and people can read it and they can sign it. But we also need to educate them exactly what it is. Again, being part of having had international relationships with international entities, in their training, they use very practical examples of what is right and what is wrong. Because what I believe is ethical and correct may not be the same for somebody else, because it goes around the way we were brought up. Religion sometimes comes into it. So it is very important that for an entity that in their code of ethics, the training is aligned to that, so that the training can speak to what is really meant by the code of ethics, and constantly changing those examples. And it is ongoing training. In our own organization, we are required to do training once a year, and we need proof that the training actually took place. Spoke about procedures, pre-employment screening, crucial for people in the procurement sector. Make sure, check out the people. The professor spoke about, the digital age, that people can very easily fudge their references and stuff like that, but it's to do a thorough screening and make sure that there's no bad history, and maybe even do additional screening than just normal vetting that is done. Classification and protection of information, it's crucial as well. I mean, policies and procedures need to be placed to make sure that all that is protected. Procurement professionals sit with a lot of information, and a lot of it is confidential information, and that needs to be part of what they need to protect. Data security standards, crucial for procurement, and their IT needs to make sure that whatever information is available needs to be protected. And then incident reporting, whenever there's an incident. And I actually would like to ask if it's possible to, on the poll, ask the question, have you reported an incident before, and have you had any reaction to it? Because we speak about whistleblowing, we speak about it, and we see it in tenders where you can report if there's anything that you believe is not ethical or is not above board. And it'll be very interesting to see feedback from the participants, whether they've had any reaction. We've done it on a couple of times, and yeah, some of them landed up in the newspapers recently, but it took a couple of years before it surfaced. So I'm just asking the question, if companies put those ethics lines out there, are they really serious about it? And are they not just paying lip service to it, or are they actually addressing these issues? Sorry, I just need to quickly complete this thing so I can get rid of my screen. Sorry, they've taken my voting away and I can't access my screen. Okay. I think what's important is that education and training, we spoke about education and training, and it's got to be ongoing. Audits, any organization who professes to have a code of ethics should ensure that they do both internal and external audits on a regular basis, and not necessarily alerting people beforehand that they are going to do these investigations. They just sometimes need to rock up at a desk and do it's particularly around procurement, make sure that the audits are taking place. Accounting controls need to be in place. Lebo, you asked about me paying you 10,000 Rand a month and taking on a holiday and all the rest of it. If you're a privately owned company, I think you'd basically be able to get away with it. But in a corporate environment, and if you have the controls in place, it's very difficult if your accounting policies and controls are in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. Very importantly is the segregation of duties and checks. There again, I think one of the participants passed a comment about engineering procurement in particular, where sometimes procurement happens and it's not necessarily the right product or the right quality, and it actually means that then it actually costs more at the end of the day. And you often find it with OEM products where parts and accessories are secured where they think it's I can just replace whatever needs to be replaced with another cheaper product from my friend, and at the end of the day the actual product at the end of the day suffer as far as that is concerned. Some of the early warnings approaches that can be recommended or adopted to look out for is secrecy, excessive secrecy. If people all of a sudden don't want to share as much information or trying to hide information and not being open and honest with the feedback, people resisting audits or reluctance to delegate some of the functions that they need to do. Normal procedures are ignored. That's an indication that something may not be right. We spoke about lifestyle audits. Sometimes it's quite easy if you just walk through the car park. You have some indication of what staff earn. It's amazing how, I don't know what it is in our DNA and in our egos, but whoa, we like fancy cars. And I think in the last week or so, we have seen evidence of that as well with some of the assets that were seized, all these fancy cars. But I mean, just walk through the car park at your organization, and you can just ask questions to see what's happening there. What other questions did you have for me? I can access my screen again. Thank you very much. No, God.
That's fine. I think, Maria, you've really covered most of the things, and for me, and I like the one of these comments around the stakeholders, that in fact we should really come together as all the stakeholders, carrying this one head, ensuring that we move towards one direction. That whole integration, I think, is very, very, very important. But also at the same time, you identify an area where you say we have policies, we have processes, there's documents that are signed off. And it's normally coming from the organization's perspective. Do people even understand what it really means? Because now it gets back now to the DNA of a person. It's no longer about the organization. It's a person that is seated there that is really conducting some of this unethical, conduct. But I just want to ask this question. If I'm a service provider right now, and I'm doing business with an organization, and I have been asked, the question that you said that, we must ask that question around how many people were asked to pay bribes or probably have requested bribes around it as well. How do we protect those service providers? Also, the supply chain professionals, because, survey really shows us that people, we did that survey 3 weeks ago, and in terms of that survey, one of the questions that we asked to the respondent were really around how many of them will really report any misconduct in the organization. I think out of 108 2015, you know, I must just get my facts right around that. Out of that, the professionals, in fact, indicated that, I mean, the survey was done for supply chain professionals, the practitioners, the consultants, you know, and the service providers as well. So we asked the question specifically in terms of the regulatory framework. We asked around professionalism. We asked around the likelihood, I mean, to report on corruption. Out of the 118 people, I think 86.4% indicated that yes, they would report. When it comes to that, 13.6% indicated no, they are not going to report on any corruption activities. So we further asked the question, and the question really was, as a supply chain professional, do you feel secure and protected if you report on corruption? 81.4% indicated that they don't feel protected by the system, and the 18.6% said yes. So can you see you know, how appalling those numbers really look? People who really want to report. However, what they're saying is that we don't feel protected. In fact, that if we report such conduct, that we'll be taken to task as well. And this was done for 118 professionals and also service providers in the industry.
Yeah, as I say, as a service provider, sorry, to just get back to you, with these policies and procedures, and again, the professor spoke about the universities and academia having to train it. I think that organizations should take control of that training as far as ethics and corruption are concerned, and link the policies and procedures to that training to have practical examples. Because your understanding and my understanding say we understand what it's all about, but will somebody else have that same understanding? So I do believe there's an obligation towards organizations to actually also take control of that. If it's part of their DNA, and if they say that they are an ethical organization, they should make sure that they train this ongoingly, and ask the questions from the staff, test them to see if there's a proper understanding of what it's all about. As I say, we speak about the procurement people, but there's so many other people up and down the chain that is part of this, that can participate in corruption, that you cannot just put it at the door of the procurement people. The procurement individuals are just part of that whole link, and they should be the gatekeepers. And as whistleblowers, they should be protected. If an organization say that we are ethical and their procurement person blows the whistle, they should protect that person.
Indeed, Maria. I mean, I remember one of the comments that I received on LinkedIn sometime last week. Someone commented and said, you know what, we need to see CEOs, CFOs, engineers being part of this conversation. You know, it shouldn't just be a supply chain, because we are talking to each other around here. But what we should be seeing is CEOs really being part of these conversations to understand how, you know, what is happening around supply chain is in fact affecting the organizations, you know, as well. And how they can really support us and really support the entrepreneurs, the business people out there to ensure that there's growth and there's also development. Vule has raised his hand as well. Vule, if you can contribute to the subject.
Thanks very much. You know, it's really amazing. You know, what Maria has observed is that, you know, it looks like, you know, people live in their cars, you know, because when you see someone really buying a car of 1.7 or 2 million rands, you know, you get surprised. But anyway, it's part of life. But the reason why I raised my hand, I've got a question which I thought, you know, it would not really do justice if I have to answer it to Michael Ngube, you know, alone, you know, in the sense that this is really one of the most important questions. He was asking to say, if we are saying that procurement is an enabler of economic growth and, you know, is really one of the critical areas that we can use to reindustrialize South Africa, why are we still, you know, doing long-term or evergreen contracts? I think it's a very good question in the sense that, look, you know, at the moment, you know, the state, you know, all state-owned enterprises as well as government departments, they don't do, you know, we are not allowed to do evergreen contracts. However, one needs to look at the element that, look, if you want to reindustrialize South Africa, you need to make sure that at least you've got sufficient, a contract that is big enough for you. Let's say, for example, you would want to start another company, that would do the refining of crude in South Africa. You obviously need to give them sufficient contract so that the contract will be long enough for them to be able to deliver whatever they need to deliver and pay for their loans. And over and above that, they need to have at least a year or two where they are able to make profits. So the challenge that we have in South Africa at the moment, that's why you have got tenderpreneurs, is because of the fact that we give people 3 to 5 years contracts. And 3 to 5 years contracts, they don't sustain the business in the long run. And over and above that, we need to make sure that at least we make a conscious decision, like what has been done in the past with the likes of Eskom, when they supported companies like Exxaro. Right now, Exxaro is a company that it does not need Eskom in terms of supplying coal. So part of what we need to do as the procurement fraternity, we need to look at the elements of saying, how do we manage to develop small, medium enterprises that will be able to thrive on their own, that will be able to manage on their own, for some time. But at the moment, the challenge that we have is that if you've got a 3-year contract, you cannot develop someone based on, at the backbone of a 3-year contract. So, the challenge that we have, Michael, is the fact that for us, if we want to reindustrialize suppliers, we need to make sure that at least we identify specifics, suppliers that will be able to support them for a longer period. Because if we don't do that, we've got a challenge in the long run. Thank you very much, Lebo. And I don't know whether, Michael, I've managed to answer your question. Thank you.
Well, I guess he shall respond online, and we'll be able to, if there's any other questions, then they will definitely be addressed around that. I agree with yourself, Vule, in that environment. And there's really just still so much that we need to do. There's so much that us as industry, we are really driving. There's so much in terms of support, in terms of protecting as well, that we need to do, as the professionals, as professional bodies as well. I mean, we are seeing that, we know supply chain is strategic where we are. We are strategic, and where we are, we want to be able to make the right decisions on behalf of the country, on behalf of the country, but also for the organizations in terms of, shareholder value that we need to add. Kamogelo, you want to add something on that, if I can give you a chance?
No, absolutely, and thank you, Melebo. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about small business, so I thought, I shouldn't lose this opportunity. In developing countries, procurement and supply chain contributes about 25% to GDP. Way bigger than many industries that unfortunately we put so much effort and forgot about this industry. And if you look at small businesses in developing countries, here in South Africa, our studies indicate that any supplier that is registered in any kind of a database, 80% of those individuals of those companies are small businesses, right? Hiring, at least employing about 60% of people that are employed in the country. So if we are really serious about economic development, and particularly as supply chain professionals, Vule, I know you'll agree with me in this, and perhaps I'm not sure if I'm conflicted, in terms of a professional body, but here it's a thing. We've adopted principles that were developed for a particular set of economic challenges, and we've applied them in different set of economic challenges. And I'm talking about just a simple principle, what we call the Kraljic model. We spoke a lot about this in Vule, that in developing countries, we need to throw that principle out of the way. Unfortunately, that's what we've been taught. We've been taught that if it's a company that is coming from an international company, we need to give them 5 to 10 year contracts. And exactly what Vule said, if it's a small business, what do we do in Vule? We put them in that quadrant that there's thousands of people, and then we don't even give them a contract for 1 year in Vule. We put them in a portal We've developed principles in National Treasury that says, no, you must be rotated. Okay? We give you business today, you do very well at it, you deliver on time, on budget, in full, and then we say, okay, you are out. Next time we must get another person. So how is that sustainable? Because that's what the Krajic model says. And when we then contract this big conglomerates company, we say, oh, those ones are very strategic. So what we forgot is that we need to define the X and the Y's ourselves, right? Do not take what has been defined in developed countries and try to use them here. So turn it around and say, in our circumstances as developing countries, if we really want to drive industrialization, for us, that strategic quadrant must be the quadrant for small business. Because those people are the ones that are employing the biggest majorities of youth and women in our country. And you know what happens, Lebo, right? When you hire a woman, when you hire youth, you know the multiple effects of that 1 rand. Unlike when you hire Kamchelo, right? That 1 rand will get out, it will be out in Ishebini in no go. But if I employ a woman, I know that 1 rand will impact 10 other people in that family. So I'm really challenging all of us. Those that are employing strategic sourcing principles, please throw out that principle, write your own X and Y's, Z, and say to the organization, our strategic quadrant and the strategic principles for us in this country is to develop small businesses. There cannot be an organization, regardless of the size, whether listed in JSE or not. And by the way, procurement professionals that are here today, you made stock exchange what it is today. If you see the numbers that are in the JSE and you don't like them, you made them. Exactly what Ndate Vule said. Ndate Vule was very key in developing Exaro, right? Exaro is a listed company. He made Exaro what it is today. So if you do not like the ownership of JSE today, you made it, right? You applied the strategic sourcing principles and said, no, I'm going to create all of this company. Now you are coming back and say, no, but you must transform JSE. You must do what we created it. So if you really want to make an impact, and that's why the discussions about engineering and all of those things, we must challenge these principles that we have been taught, and especially leaders that consistently want to benefit. And we have seen, by the way, whether it's in the audit space, in the financial space, we've seen the beneficiaries who are those beneficiaries, right? It's those people with long qualifications that are professional bodies that are fortunately not in supply chain. In the audits, in the financial institution that have benefited for not wanting to change the status quo. So for all of us, go back in your environment, change the status quo and write your own principles, whether it's code of ethics or whatever it is, write your own principles. Thank you, Lebo.
You see, if I were to open a union for supply chain, I will appoint Kamokhelo as my spokesperson. Thank you, Kamokhelo, around that. I mean, for my last comment, my last question, and it speaks to small businesses. Colleagues, I think we know that one form of corruption is through fronting. And it really speaks to the element that you're talking about, Kamokhelo, around developing small businesses, developing small organizations to ensure that there's also beneficiation in our country, to ensure that we localize, we industrialize in our country as well. You know, I don't want us to dwell too much on this, but I also want us, just as a one-liner on your side, I just want to hear what your view is around fronting. I mean, I know you are fully involved in a lot of ESD initiatives and so forth. So I don't want you to take much time around it, but just really saying, you know, fronting as that lever of corruption in the supply chain, you know, the detection and the leadership around, and how do we turn around, you know, the smaller service providers, obviously, to be more developed to an extent that the reliance of business will not be via corruption, not via paying the bribes and so forth.
Lebo, it's very sad. I mean, you know, we have to really think carefully about what we do at Lebo. I mean, you know, we've seen sophisticated corruption, and especially in big companies using small businesses, and there's so many companies in the country. I mean, you hear about a company today, Lebo, that is turning 50 million, 100 million. Then you hear about its own subsidiary doing business with itself, also bidding for projects, and a mother company also bidding for the same project. And then you see schemes around, you know, in the world today, there's something that is called preference shares, right? Where, and the BE Act have been trying to fight this thing, but unfortunately it is still there. And Maria spoke about how do we detect all of these things. We need to educate ourselves. That when I look at a BE certificate and I look at and ask for a BE report, I ask for a shareholder certificate, I ask for a letter of authority, you will see interesting things. And then you also look at their financials as well of those companies and see if the beneficiaries are actually being paid those dividends. And you will be very much surprised. In some industries, you'll find that there is one company which has been set by people that drives our economy, that has multiple ownership in about 100 companies, right? And they created trust upon trust upon trust. And when you try to find out, well, where are these beneficiaries? You can't even find these beneficiaries. So real empowerment goes beyond the BE certificate. So if as organizations you ask for solutions level, here's one solution. In all our supply chain, when we onboard suppliers, the BE certificate is not enough. The BE report that you must ask is not enough. Are you asking for the shareholder certificates? Are you asking for the shareholders' agreements? Lastly, are you asking for the letter of authority? So for me, as a takeaway for all of us, we must put this thing as part of our onboarding process for all suppliers. Because if we do not, and even by the way, the last one is your financials, which they must anyway submit when they submit tenders, isn't it? So if you put this thing all into one pot, there's horrible things that are happening. And as you rightly said, Lebo, there's a corruptor and there's a corruptee. Those people that are also being fronted and they are aware of it, they must be reported to the BE Commission. We must start seeing people going to jail. What happened recently, you said I mustn't speak lastly, there is a one BEE firm, audit firm, that was fingered by the BE Commission. I would have wanted the BE Commission to take the executives of that company to jail because they were suspended, but now they are back doing business. And as Herman said, why are we not seeing those people going to jail? So we must go back again to the BE Commission as well. So let's start reporting those things. Whilst there is a process of dealing with it in the regulations, especially in public sector, or whether it's a Companies Act, we must start reporting those people and then make sure that the BE Commission deals with it effectively.
Okay, colleagues, I think this dialogue gets me when you're talking about the integration already. You're talking about multiple stakeholders, supply chain bodies, professional, and so forth. But also we are indicating that it really goes beyond supply chain, box that we have created. You bring in elements in terms of the BE Commission, there's Corruption Watch, there's SAICA. There are all these organizations that are already a feed on what we are doing, and really saying that, if SAICA can get rid of, take off the license to operate for a CFO, that CFO already probably is the one that's leading the supply chain department at that point in time. They are our main important stakeholder as well in that process, that we should really be able to learn and integrate just about everyone, not only the supply chain as we know it, our profession, but also multiple other stakeholders that exist out there. Colleagues, thank you. Maria, thanks a lot for your insight in terms of integration, which takes us to the last panelist, colleagues, which is Kamogelo. Kamogelo, you have to now start just proceeding already, with the conversation. Kamogelo, colleagues, is a CEO for TK Global Experts, and what he does as well, he serves as an advisory board and SAPIC's, the SAPIC's director and serving on various advisory boards. So he's representing both organizations today. You know him, he served on various companies in boards as well. He's a thought leader in supply chain, and you can hear his passion already as he is speaking out there, that he really is very passionate about supply chain. I said it earlier, colleagues, that everyone that's part of this panel is everyone that's really, has got the passion to contribute to the supply chain fraternity. Kamohelo, your topic today is really around the regulatory policy framework. I mean, earlier I asked the question, how easy or difficult is it to break the rules? I mean, I think most people are asking themselves, what is really existing out there in terms of the regulatory frameworks from both the private and the public sector, which informs, the good practices in supply chain. There's also, the narrative saying that, within this, with all these policies existing where we are, we still faced with unethical practices in procurement. We see the corruption, we've spoken about fronting as it is now. Is there a specific reason why there is no traction? We are saying things are happening, but they're not happening, at the same time. Are all these policies adequate? Are we not enforcing enough as leadership of the country? If you can just give us some insights around it.
Thanks, Lebo. I must also, I see that Amanda is looking at me. I must also declare that I'm also the chairperson of the SIPS Gauteng. So I'm taking everything. It doesn't matter where you are, professional bodies, we must start working together to achieve one common purpose that Ozaya spoke about. We do not have lack of laws, regulations to deal with fraud and corruption. I mean, a very simple act Act number 12 of 2004 that speaks to prevention and combating of corruption activities. A simple Companies Act, good corporate governance. Everyone understands that the Companies Act on its own, seeks to promote transparency, accountability of South African corporate sector. And as Maria said, it seeks to encourage segregation of duties, especially, and this is very, very important statement that Maria has made about segregation of duties. The president, in one of his recent speech, said that the board of directors must get out of supply chain. But are we really seeing companies implementing this? We are not even seeing the policies being amended to reflect what the president's desire is. So it's a president's desire, but it's not, if it doesn't come up to be backed up by policy, unfortunately, it ends up just as it is, just a mere statement. And we have to be very careful here in Melitwalo, because, we've seen, for example, some of the board members. There was a time where I saw a minister going to court to respond on a query on a purchase order. I felt very bad. I remember some years ago, I went to Ntate Vule's office. I think it was around 8 o'clock at night, and he was busy on a call speaking to one of the board members about a purchase order, trying to issue a purchase order. I said to Ntate Vule, I called at your level. And when all of his direct reports were sitting at home, he was sitting there on the phone trying to create a purchase order. So something went wrong, obviously, when a minister can get access to a purchase order. When a board member who ran to court with a contract saying, no, I want to declare this thing illegal, right? Where was our first line of defense? Because the first line of defense, and if you look at the principles of the Companies Act that is also backed by King Code of Governance, management is the first line of defense. And for me, when everything fails, regardless of whatever acts that we have, now we've even amended the Public Audit Amendment Act that empowers the Auditor General to go beyond what they used to do in the past, to give them some teeth. But at the end of the day, and as Vule had said, it's about management. Whether you have issues around irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, it's always about leadership and about management and putting principles and that will make sure that these things doesn't happen. I mean, there is one organization that has a statement, Meletswalo, that says they make it easy for you to comply. I'm sure you know who that is. They make it easier for you to comply and to file, and they make it very difficult for you if you do not want to comply, right? So we know which organization that is, and that's how it should be. We must make it very easy for people that are doing good, right? And they must be rewarded. Right? And because that organization I spoke to, if you comply, you get your money within a minute, within seconds, you get your money in your bank account. But if you do not want to comply, and those people that are standing against leaders in our organizations that wants to put their hands in the till, they must be rewarded. Unfortunately, we reward the wrong people. And those people that are known in the organization, I mean, in the organizations, people do not have to do all of these things, research and put all these things in place. We know who the bad apples are. They are spoken on the corridors, on a coffee machine. We know who they are, but they get rewarded. And when they get rewarded, everybody else beneath them keep quiet. Because the sense is that, oh, if they can get away with it, who am I to start reporting? Whilst we have this whistleblowing and all of these things, unfortunately, we should not only be having policies, but we must also be seen as implementing those policies for good governance. For professional bodies, Meletswalo, and I've been responding a lot to some of those questions that came from the participants, very, very good questions. For professional bodies in this country, SAQA is mandated to be the one that registered those professional bodies. Yes, if supply chain can be a statutory body, and here's a question for me, for all of us here in supply chain. Recently, there was a public procurement bill, which level I'll probably end with just high level of what the procurement bill seeks to do. Have we responded on that process that was a public process that seek to lay the foundation? Because what does a professional body does? It must set a standard. It must promote an understanding and principles in that profession. It must recognize and register designations. It must encourage social responsibility and accountability. Right? It must promote pride. Are we really proud to stand in front or in the middle of many people and say, I am a procurement or supply chain professional? Are we proud? Because that's the aim of the professional body. And have we really responded and said the bill, because if we lose this one opportunity, and where the bill is not going to promulgate the existence of that professional body, unfortunately, we'll have to wait many, many years. We know that there is a study group that is looking at how this professional body is going to be. But if we miss it in the bill, because now we have an opportunity, I mean, the current regulatory framework has been there since 1996, right? So it took us more than 20 years to try to have something new. So if we miss this opportunity, we are going to have to wait another 20 years for something to be promulgated, to have a proper statutory body. Yes, the work has started. SAPICs are now collaborating to make sure that we have something. And Vule and myself as well, we are part of the Supply Chain Council. And we need to make sure that everybody else comes together to make one professional body where, and you can choose, right? So we have people that specialize in logistics, people that specialize in freight forwarding. All of us can collaborate to set a standard. You can choose, but globally, we all have to make sure that we collaborate for one purpose. Just in summary, what does the bill has and does in terms of professionalization level? It introduces what is called a debarment, right? So in other words, when people are found wanting in the supply chain process, and especially suppliers, the suppliers, chapter 2 as an example, says that the regulator may intervene by taking steps, appropriate steps, right? When individuals or people continuously and persistently breach the act or the bill itself. So now it empowers the regulators to say that the regulator or mere regulator, hopefully it's going to be mere regulator, you can intervene and take appropriate action. Chapter 3 of the draft procurement bill, which is dedicated to integrity, says that the regulator may issue debarment against a bidder, their label, so it is there, right? Against not just professionals or officials, but also against suppliers that commit fraud and corruption or collusive or any kind of malpractices. So the bill seeks to introduce those practices, but again, as all the speakers have said today, it's all about leadership. If we are going to reward and constantly reward people that do not deliver, you know how long those people that wake up every day and go to work and just attend, they just go to work every day. They stay long in organizations. People that radically want to change things, they do not stay long. Right? No, next time we must listen to the story of Dadevul, and I think it must be written in a book because really we must learn from his experience. If you try to radicalize and make sure that you implement the things that we spoke about, unfortunately you unsettle many people and they will deal with you effectively. And it's okay. The study today, Lebo, it's about, I think it's moved up to about 23%, if I remember it, what was it, 30% of people that says do not feel safe. You do not have to feel safe, right? At a leadership level, we can understand for people that are worried about their jobs, but generally, for leaders, you should not have to feel safe. If you're stopped by a cop and you're thinking that he will shoot you if you don't pay, if you do not give him cold drink, then there's a problem with us as well. So for leaders, don't even worry about feeling safe. Continuously do what is right. Remember those words? I'd rather die for something that is right than to live being quiet. I'll end with that, Melitwala.
I'm glad you raised it, that you rather die for raising for something that is, because the honesty around this conversation is that it has rattled and unsettled a lot of people. It's a conversation that has led people to really say that, listen, I'm getting money. I'm not going to be part of this crazy conversation of yours because I'm probably getting money, or because I'm paying bribes to get business. So what if I don't get business? So conversations like this, colleagues, are conversations that people just do not support. And we must be aware and we must be clear around it. It's the same as yourself as a professional out there. If you are advocating on right practices in the organization, you'll always be that person that's seen, that's breaking the process through, that's not supportive as well. And yes, you shall be removed as well by some of these organizations because you become a loudmouth person. And we are talking from all the experiences that we have and also the people that we talk to as well in the industry. It is expected of us to be submissive to the wrongdoings of the industry, of the organizations. And we are saying that with leadership, we are taking the stance to move forward. I mean, Kamogelo, there was, out of the survey that we've done, there was a comment, and I think I shared it with you, where they're saying that we probably need to include, we need to revise PFMA Act and triple PFA to ensure that it is aligned to the global supply chain management standards. So what do you think about that? I mean, you're talking about policy, you're talking about frameworks, you're talking about what is existing out there.
Thanks, Melitwalo. As I said before, we are in a very good space now that, especially in public sector, that the public procurement bill is being issued for public comments and it's going under a review. So the entire supply chain framework, it's now going under a review, which is very, very good. And the bill, if you read the bill, it says that it's going to repeal some of the sections in PFMA. And some of those sections in PFMA also talks about reporting as well. So we we're really hoping that once a bill is finalized, or the final document that will come out will take supply chain out of finance, because it is PFMA that created this conflict of interest. I mean, Maria spoke about segregation of duties, right? You can't hold the purse, manage the purse, dish out the pairs, right, as the CFO does, right, and become the implementer as well. So segregation of duties does not sit well when supply chain sits within finance. But the problem is it's the PFMA, so that needs to be amended. But that's why the draft bill is seeking to at least start with that amendment. And hence, I was saying, I'm really glad that there are quite a lot of submissions that came, and we're hoping that some of those submissions really are going directly to that area, of repealing some of those conditions that were in PFMA, MFMA, and of course the current triple PFA will be repealed in its entirety. We'll then have a new regulatory framework, and that regulatory framework must implement the Constitution. We are very good in repeating Section 217, Section 1 that talks about fairness, equity. We forget about the next one that says setting aside contracts for people that are unfairly discriminated, right? We really simply forget about that. That is actually a constitutional mandate to support people that are unfairly discriminated. And those are small businesses, and in the main, Black small businesses. So unfortunately, when you apply again the Kraljic model, you are applying it against, you are going against Section 217, because Section 217 of our Constitution says, set aside contracts for people that are unfairly discriminated. So the bill is also seeking to clarify that. I mean, and that especially Transnet and Eskom were one of the, some of the organizations that, because they never used to apply a triple PFA in the past, and they created this thing that is called set aside. We've seen that is now brought back into the regulation, which is a very, very good thing. Because where there's no regulation that supports an activity, unfortunately, you'll be found wanting. So if Ndade Volo was going to set aside contracts for specific objectives, unfortunately, he will be found to be non-compliant, and he will be declared irregular expenditure and all of those other things. So we have to start there, unfortunately, at the regulation. So hence, when we're saying, are we keeping quiet? Have we really put our comments to National Treasury to change those principles? Because unfortunately, the National Treasury is stuck. They can't change it and say, no, that's what the community wants. So we'll have to write to them and say, change. And this is now a very, very good opportunity for all of us to contribute into that change. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Kamukelo. Let's just do this. All right. So there is one question and recommendation that came our way, and the recommendation is around both private and public, sector certifying against the international standards such as ISO 37001, the anti-bribery management system, and the ISO 2400 Sustainable Procurement Guide, and other relevant UN, WTO, and OECD regulatory requirements. And it was proposed that certification of these companies against the standards or requirements needs to be continuously checked on an annual basis by certification bodies through surveillance audits. Yourself and where's Hammond? And Hammond, exactly. Both representing SIPs and SAPICs as well. I don't know if you are familiar with those standards, the ISO 37001 and the ISO 20400 in terms of Sustainable Procurement Guide and other OECD regulatory requirements. And I thought this was a brilliant, proposal, because it's not always that there is a full alignment in terms of this requirement.
Yeah. So yeah, let me answer. I give Kamukelo a break right now, but so So there's several, to be honest, there's several. So the SIPS code of conduct and the SIPS ethics test also makes reference to the modern slavery law in the UK, out of the US, in Australia. It speaks about sustainability, and ethics and sustainability sort of intertwined. When you look at sustainability, it's also talking about green procurement, procurement with environmental standards attached to it, the wise use of our resources, modern slavery. So it's very broad. But yes, I think those standards stick out, and we could definitely adopt them. Some of it has been incorporated into our standards, being a global professional body,
Yes.
but it's not widespread. I can say that. Yeah. So definitely there's space for it. And I think it needs to be aspirational for companies to actually have that mark on an accreditation to say, do you want to do business with us because of we subscribe to these standards, and it's something like SABS, for instance, but it gives it more of an international flair and flavor, and what they really subscribe to.
Okay, thank you. Kamogelo, your comment on that. And while Kamogelo is going to comment on that, colleagues, we are almost at the end of our session. I want you, as you are seated there, start thinking of what should we take away, because as I indicated, we need to come up with solutions, recommendations, and so forth at a high level. So I will go across all the panelists after I finish off with Kamogelo. Then just give me, what recommendations or solutions can we take forward. Then we can just compile it so that it can be taken in organizations, it can be taken forward as well from the to the government perspective as well, to say that this is how, as leadership in supply chain, we really want to support in really curbing corruption in our country. So Kamogelo, on behalf of SAPIX, what is your view around that?
Yeah, so you're actually saying I must be very short, and I will be. Yes, again, international principles must always serve as a benchmark. We must write the rules that for our own circumstances all the time, because if you can't internalize it, it's more like strategy. People that are in the board, in ESCOs, they understand the strategy very well, but if you go to people on the ground, they can't internalize the strategy because they don't see how it impacts what they do on a daily basis. So whatever regulations that we want to put on, and that's why the Code of Ethics is a benchmark. It brings all of these practices together that professionals and stakeholders, including suppliers, must abide to. And that has also now in this bill been introduced, because where it talks about evaluation, for example, where there is a question around suppliers to be evaluated, normally we'll only ask about experience, how long have you been doing this thing. The bill has now introduced a question about professionalization of that company. Has that company been certified? And are they a member of their professional body? So if you're in engineering, we expect that your engineers are going to be members of the professional body, ICSA, whoever that professional body is. If it's a service provider, so people that will be doing the policies, revising policies for Ndate-Vole, they must be members of a professional body. It will be a surprise if we see tenders coming out and do not dictate that people that will be working with supply chain documents, they must become members of a professional body of supply chain. And not just finance, because we know, we said, no, we want to see your cycle license, your audit and all. No. If you're going to work in supply chain, we must start. And once we see, Ndate-Vole taking that lead, we know that the industry will then follow. And everybody else will then apply the very same principle, but at least the draft bill is trying to introduce that language in the supply chain environment. So I really think that as a professional bodies, we must support all of these activities and make sure that we work together with organizations. And I'm glad that Amant from SIPS, they are also working with the municipalities as well to professionalize and to bring professionalization in the way they do things. So I'm really hoping that all of us will support this activity, not just from SIP's side, but from SAPIC's as well.
Thank you, Kamogelo. I just want to quickly share some of the results that came out of the survey that we had. Remember, I indicated that it was 118 respondents that we had. And by order of priorities, we had, I think, 50 professionals that says that their first choice of preference is to regulate the procurement profession. And really focus on professionalism. They have also indicated the second priority that we should be focusing on is the license to practice within the profession. And then the third part, they said that we must institute a fitness test for supply chain. That's the third choice in terms of priority. And the last choice, they were saying that, instituting a pledge or an oath system for professional conduct. So by order of priority, they're indicating those. Firstly is professionalism. Second one is license to practice. Thirdly is instituting a fitness test. And the last one is instituting a pledge or oath for the professional conduct. And I think one of the things that most of the, the attendees would have seen is that we've been running a petition in the industry around hashtag supply chain against corruption. We really invite you to participate on that on petition, colleagues, because that's what we want to take forward in terms of the country as leadership, as supply chain bodies as well. There's a lot of endorsement. We've seen that also from SAPICs, and we're seeing also academia. I know SIP's Hemant has also committed to that, but we're looking at organizations as well to support this as a supply chain profession, hashtag supply chain against corruption. And what we will be doing as well is just resending the link again to some of the participants that we have. So one of the response that we had that speaks to the regulatory frameworks, Kamogelo, is that 58 people indicated that they will actively report on corruption activities. And their first choice is really that, in fact, the first choice is to set anti-corruption policies. And then it must be followed by reporting on the corruption activity. So what they're saying that as much as we want to report, we need to set up those policies first to enable and to create a platform, in the industries. So what the respondent, also one of the questions that we asked was really around the due diligence and the probity of the service providers. So their first choice in that regard, they indicated that we need to promote access to information for due diligence and probity studies as well. And I think we spoke about that. And I have to say to attendees that I didn't share any of this information to yourself. So I always want to tick off and see that if you've really covered exactly what the industry is really raising. And the last part which we proposed, and we asked that question, that should we blacklist the indicted service providers? I think 43 of the respondents said that, that's the second choice for us in terms of blacklisting. We need to promote first that access, and then afterwards, then we can, scratch off any service provider that is found to be indicted in any of this, these corrupt activities. I think I also shared around supply chain professionals in terms of are they likely to report on corruption? I've already shared all those stats and the protection that is needed around that. So colleagues, in us getting to the end, I'm going to start asking all of you, what solutions are you recommending? I mean, we have attendees who are part of this session today. They need to take something. I know there's a lot that they have taken out of this whole process. And I really want to know, what solutions and recommendations have you got that we can put together on our side. But also, I'm just trying to scroll through some of the questions. I can see most of the questions already have been responded to. I just want to see if there's anything that we have not. Okay, there's the issue of the statutory body to strike out professionals of the register. I think that's what we've been talking about, that if we have that, if we found to be wanting, then we take it off in terms of the process. And then There is also a comment around that, having worked overseas, most of the people that are found in corruption, they end up in jail. I think we have seen circumstances like Korea and them. What do they do with people that are found to be in corruption? Why are we not really looking at some of those things that are implemented by other countries? And then someone spoke around collaboration. I think we've already indicated the issue of the draft procurement bill. I think, Amogelo, you touched based on that. And then let's see.
Lebo, can I just answer
Yes.
that question on Stephen? Stephen, I fully agree. I was typing that question actually, but I fully agree that a statutory body that is brought by an act of parliament, that is definitely what is required. And hence I spoke about the bill because the bill is an act of parliament. So if we missed it, we'll have to create and write another act of parliament. That's why I was saying it might take a long time. But I know that there is a study group that is dealing with that, with the research, and perhaps if that research is concluded before the bill gets promulgated, maybe those two get together. Absolutely, I agree with you.
All right, and to the attendees, I mean, if there's anything extra that you want to ask, I mean, you can always send the questions to the WISCA email to Rose and Katleho. You will get that email through from our side. But going back to the panelists, colleagues, I'm gonna start with yourself, Maria, on your side. What should you take forward? What is the recommendation that, from your side? And it doesn't necessarily have to be specific to the topic that you were focusing on. I just want you just to take this forward as something that will take this supply chain dialogue to the next level and for us to start seeing some traction in the industry.
Thank you, Levo. I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm looking at the number of participants that dialed in, and it's actually, I think we've got a daunting task on our hands because there are so many people doing procurement throughout public and private sector. How do we reach them? That to me, I think, is the most important thing, because some people, somebody mentioned, people start with a company and they work there for 40 years and the world just passes them by. Some of them land up in procurement. How do we reach those people? Because a lot of what's happening is happening around them, and how do we get to them? So I mean, a database of procurement people, I think, should be a big start. I don't know who's going to tackle that project, but I think it's quite a daunting task to identify all those procurement people. And then just from my side, I think we've got a lot of education to do. Once we know who all these individuals are, and we can't just leave it to the universities. We need to get to those people and do the education. SIPS has got their programs and a couple of other programs as well, besides the universities. But we need to do maybe just smaller skills development initiatives or whatever, just to get the message across to the people as a start. That's from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria. Ozias?
Thank you, Lebo, and thanks to the participants. It's been quite an engrossing engagement. I think if I think about takeaways, I will segregate them into three focal areas. The first one about us as professionals. I think Vole did indicate that we need to really be thinking about the back to basics approach. If you find yourself in an uncomfortable situation and you don't have the necessary skill set to deal with that, I think it is important then that you adopt a continuous professional development as an individual. At the moment, what is bedeviling us is really the understanding of ethics and professional conduct within the supply chain function. I would therefore urge all participants that are present today that their next professional development activity really has to be focused on ethics and corporate governance. and what it means for them as individuals. I think the second one, still at an individual level, really a sense of belonging. We're driving towards a statutory professional body of supply chain. We will get there. But in the meantime, while we're making baby steps to get there, we do have voluntary professional supply chain bodies. I will urge everyone to belong to one, at least have a collective conversations around this issue so that you don't feel alone in a little corner and you really find yourself overwhelmed. As we live today, if you don't belong to a voluntary professional body, please, they are available here today. Go into the system, see which one meets with your expectation and belong to one of those. It's very, very, very important. I think at an organizational level, we have to understand that we cannot always be blaming supply chain as not having done its gatekeeping role, when in terms of a function, it has not always been elevated to sit at the right table to be able to do that from the onset. My message to organizations is really to look at their organizational structure and reflect critically where they place the supply chain function for them to be able to draw all the value add that the function brings. Obviously, if they elevate the function, it means then they need to attach some requirements to those that man the function. And those requirements need to talk to the professional aspect of it. You only want confirmed, certified professionals to function within that function, such that you can draw rewards of the function itself, but also of the key competence that comes with the skill set that is manning that particular function. So that would be my suggestion towards organization. But over and above, today is really about us as a society, as a professional entity, as a practitioner space, as an industry. I think as part of the ongoing petition that we have floated around, that was seeking responses to, I still maintain that we need an audience with number one, to immediately speak around what are the kind of enabling developments that are coming through from a legislative perspective, to be able to create that space for supply chain to first and foremost self-regulate, but also secondly, to be utilized as a specialist strategic partner in ensuring that the fight against corruption and graft is won. I think that one for me is very crucial. As an industry, we need to continue that lobby and make sure that this happens before year end. At least it will give gravitas to some of the initiatives that we're trying to do. And then lastly is really an understanding and awareness that supply chain as a discipline is not a theoretical discipline, it is a practical discipline. And as Vule also indicated, I think it has to be a partnership between academia and practitioners. So when we come calling and seek you to participate in our industry advisory board, we know you have limited time, but please avail yourselves, because these are the pathways that create opportunities for you to inform what goes into the program. As we do program reviews, be present. As we do module reviews, be present. As we investigate possibilities of introducing new augmented qualifications in supply chain, be present, because it speaks to your area. I think I will stop here. Obviously, through your level, I'm hoping that there will be direct access to us if any of the panelists want to follow up on some of the issues that we have raised. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Osias. Dr. Mampani.
I was saying that he was just speaking to me indirectly when he says, avail yourself. I'm available now. Prof, I will make time. Thanks for the invite. One of the procurement lawyers that is there at Transnet, Peter Volnik, once said, do not blame the mouse, blame the hole in the wall. So let us go and find those holes and block the holes instead of pointing fingers at the mouse. The mouse did what it's supposed to do. That is what it meant to do. So the journey for professionalization and the licensing to practice, let it continue. And in collaboration, working together with all the partners here today, corporate, professional bodies, academic, I think we will be able to achieve the intention, and we'll be able to achieve that statutory or non-statutory body for now, but definitely all of us needs to work together to license this practice. Thanks, Melzwana.
Thank you, Kamogelo. Hemant?
Yeah, thanks, Lebo. I'm going to be a bit longer than Kamakelo this time. I just joined on everyone's conversations, and it's been really good. You've put together a great panel, so thank you for the opportunity. I think for me, one of the takeaways is obviously corruption is a finite game. Everyone feels the same about it, and we need to just eradicate it. So we're all on the same page. It needs leadership, and from the top, it definitely needs skills. And I just want to touch a bit on the skills. We spoke a lot about policies, triple PFA, PFMA, and those are frameworks on how we should apply ourselves, but the skills attached to that go hand in hand. And that's about understanding contracts, the value that procurement can bring to the party, etc. And through that, I think we're going to elevate the profession. It's going to give it more gravitas, and it's certainly going to get advanced. Professionalization is important, and yes, the collaboration between professional bodies, academic institutes, private and public sector is critical for this. And I don't think we must carry on in the spirit of collaboration, and we mustn't see this as being opportunistic and just move forward. Yes, belong to a professional body, as Isaias mentioned. It's great. As a SIPS member, I just want to put a small punt out there. We do an annual ethics test. It's free to members. If you're not a member, you can also get onto it. And it's not going to make you ethical. It's not going to bring about a sense of ethics, but it's going to raise awareness and it's going to guide your moral compass. We recently had Rand Water achieve their corporate ethics certification as an organization. They're the first public sector organization in the whole of South Africa to get this. So the challenge is out there, for companies to come forward and do this. And I think we haven't touched on the governance around board of directors as well. They also need to be a lot more assertive in these issues. Take a stance, make a call, and make decisions around this, and don't pander around the issues. And that's where I'd like to leave it, basically. Thank you.
Vule, you know what they say, that the last one is the king.
No.
If I was to translate that in Tswana, people wouldn't understand that. But we know that the last one that speaks.
Yeah. No, but thanks very much, Lebo. I think colleagues, it was very nice, to spend, the morning together, and I think it was, time well spent. Starting with Ozias, I know that I'm the one person that possibly I'm not that much available, but I'll do my level best to make sure that at least, as and when we go through the process, I avail myself so that at least, we can be able to, share the inputs in terms of how to move, going forward. For me, really, there are 4 takeaways, that I just need to share with the team. The rest of the staff, my colleagues, I think have represented me exceptionally well. But the one that I just need to repeat is professionalization and license to operate. That's the first one for me. The second one, Lebo, and it's not only for you, I think it's for the rest of us. In terms of your study, you're saying that, look, there are people that said, well, they are not feeling safe to be able to report corruption taking place in their own respective environment. I don't want us to go into the details as to why don't they feel safe. I think we need to think about it as, as the leadership of the procurement fraternity to say, how do we increase the reporting of corruption? Because, normally each and every organization has got their own, line that you have to call, anonymous line, and then, people still feel that they are not comfortable. I don't know, colleagues, can we think about maybe having national line that can possibly be hosted by a government department like, or national treasury, where each and every one, I mean, let's say for example, where I work, if I feel strongly that look, there's corruption taking place, and I know that if I go and report it to the people, the superiors, I know possibly the superiors are part of that, the very same corruption, nothing will happen. Possibly, if anything happens, is me being victimized and being kicked out of the organization. How about if we can think about an environment where we can be able to report this, in an independent environment that will be able to manage this or put pressure to the relevant organization to make sure that proper investigation is done. So it's just really a question that I think we need to rethink, to say, look, if we have to make sure that at least we root out corruption, I think we need to do almost everything that we can to make sure that at least we increase the reporting, because once people start to think about getting involved in corruption, and they know that there's an environment where this thing can be reported and then I can be investigated and end up in jail, then possibly people will stop that. So the second thing that I need is to say, colleagues, I think we need to avail ourselves on the issue of giving input to the academia, so that supply chain curriculum is current. And we obviously share with the academia and share with the students that are within the different institutions about what are the common issues or common challenges that we are dealing with within supply chain, so that at least whenever they get an opportunity, they incorporate that in their studies. I think that's the second thing. The last one that is very, very critical for me, colleagues, is, I mean, I've gone back, to supply chain, around about 7 months ago. And I think what I've just picked up is really a challenge, that I think all of us need to really work together. I don't know whether it's a challenge within my environment only or other state-owned enterprises and public sector, probably even the private sector. I don't know whether they are experiencing the very same challenges. I think part of what we need to do, we need to start something, that is basically going to deal with the back to basic training, like, a boot camp of some sort, where you would be able to get, people to start to understand the issues of ethics, understand the basics of why, they are put in the supply chain environment. So this one, I think for us, I know that, is something that is kind of very difficult to coordinate, but if we sit together, together ourselves as the industry and, the academia and the professional bodies, we can really come up with something that would assist, and the reason why I'm talking about the boot camp, in terms of the back to basics, there are different, bodies that deal with different, education. But for me, I need to make sure that at least we bring all the basics that we need for a person to be able to survive in supply chain, so that at least, at the end of the day, that specific person, after 3 or 4 days of boot camp, they can go back to the function and then be able to operate. So, from my point of view, Lebo, I think this was a very worthwhile exercise. And I think, for us as a team, maybe after, 3 to 6 months, I think we need to make sure that at least we form committees, or not even committees, maybe, subcommittees of people that can be able to follow up in terms of this. Because like what you said at the beginning, I would hate to be part of the talk show. I would want us to make sure that some of these that are implementable, we go there and start to implement them now, because we don't necessarily need the regulatory framework to do the boot camp, and we don't need anybody to, put a regulation for us to go and start to work very much hand in hand with the academia to support them in terms of making sure that at least whatever they're teaching the students at the university is current. And again, in terms of, maybe the challenge that we might have is an issue regarding a body or an environment or a function where we can be able to report all, the corruption that we pick up from our own respective environment. However, I think this is really those 3 things that I believe strongly that if we can focus on 1 or 2 of them, we can do a lot, in our environment. Thanks very much, Lebo, and thanks very much, colleagues.
Well, colleagues, that has been a mouthful, and I really appreciate your input and your insight around ethical leadership and the recommendations that you have put forward. We will, from our side, put them together and share with everyone else and yourself, and obviously all the recommendations going forward. What I need to flag to the participant or to the attendees is that what we will be doing is that, understandably so, the discussion today has been very broad. And if you really have to zoom in on each and every aspect of every topic that we have today, it will require a different other discussion that you're going to have. So we will be facilitating more of those conversations. And we really would like to have your insight, your contribution around that, because now we start zooming in on elements pertaining to fronting. We'll zoom in on elements pertaining to professionalism. We'll zoom into elements that speaks to other areas, the regulatory framework. We know that there's already work, but just to keep that discussion happening, it means bringing other stakeholders as well on board in terms of these discussions. So it doesn't stop here. Always remember that it doesn't stop here. We will be having more continual conversation, supply chain coaching circles as well, that will support, that will inform what we are doing from our side. So I really would like to thank yourself first as the attendees for really staying with us for such a long time. I know that some of the people have already zoomed out, but it's okay. We will be sharing the presentation with them. I want us to always remember that corruption as it is now is it's abuse of entrusted power. It's got a huge impact in terms of our, from the costing perspective, political, social, economic, and environment. So let's continue to remain and being advocates where we are in our organizations. And you must always know that all of us being here, myself and some of the colleagues that you have, all the colleagues that we have here, we have the listening ear to support you, to help you, to guide you as well in most of the areas that speaks to the supply chain profession. Let's elevate it. Let's get to the next level. It will only take us to change the current narrative. We are the leaders. We are the people that has to set the examples. And some of the people that are seated at the bottom, they just don't understand what to do. So we have started with these conversations like Vule, what you are saying, that certain things has to be taken forward. Thank you so much to our panelists. I really, when you are in a conference, you always have to clap your hands, for the panelists. I can do that for myself and just do, a thumbs up for all of you. So thank you so much for sharing your and really supporting us in this initiative. We really, 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 really value it. And we thank you so much. And we are looking forward to future conversations with yourself and having some of the participants on board. And to all the participants, again, any other questions, you can always send them. You will see that Rose and Katlego have shared their details. And also you will see that there's a petition that also has been posted there. There's a link to that. If you are interested and you're really supporting what we want to do, we really want to see your support. If you have comments around it, please put your comments. This is the end of our webinar, colleagues. Thank you so much for listening and for your contribution as panelists. Thank you. Wishing you a super awesome day.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I really enjoyed myself.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.